So one of the things that I'm seeing in the financial advisory business is children of parents wanting to come in the business. Sometimes the parents are pushing for it. Sometimes the children are pushing for it. And so I thought this would be an interesting exercise to talk about kind of the road that you've been down in terms of transitioning your business. And where I'd like to start is maybe where you are right now. What is the situation right now?
So, okay, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take. Well, Ben's now the lead advisor, and he owns the decision making for portfolio construction, for product selection, insurance, and financial planning. I'm still attending most of the meetings, but we're well on the way to transitioning the business. And everything is essentially going well as it relates to the transition. Clients seem to trust and enjoy working with Ben. We've transitioned approximately 3/4 of the client accounts to Ben with the goal of transitioning 100% sometimes next year. Ben bought the business on paper in mid-15 and with a payment schedule that makes sense for both of us.
Excellent, excellent. So Ben, could you share with me kind of the journey you've taken to get to this stage of your career?
Sure. So let's say back towards the end of high school, always had a passion for numbers, had really no exposure to business or finance other than sort of talking about stuff at home. Had a sense that something in finance would probably be a decent fit. So I ended up going into an undergrad in science, of all things, because I thought I should do something different, or that was encouraged by my parents. So I did a co-op program in science, but I did all of my co-ops in financial services. So it gave me a way to see a few different aspects of the industry. Following the undergrad, I ended up doing 2 years as an insurance wholesaler, so I could learn the insurance side of the business. Towards the end of my undergrad, I felt fairly strongly that somewhere in financial services was probably a good fit for me. So I thought learning something like the insurance side of the business, which maybe wouldn't come quite as naturally to me, would be a good thing to do. So I did that for 2 years, did a 1-year full-time MBA, and then it's been 4 years now since I've been in the business as an advisor. Also along the way, I tried to chip away at some of the industry stuff because I know how hard it can be to try to do things like the CFP or CLU or some of the other designations in licensing, while also working, trying to, spend time with the family. So I try to get as much of that out of the way as possible before joining the business so that once I was working, I could focus on working and still have a reasonable work-life balance. So it's been 4 years now since joining the business, and it's been really good.
Excellent, excellent. So, what have the two of you learned along the way? And maybe another way of putting it is, if you had to do it all over again, is there anything you would have done differently? Any surprises as you went along, in terms of dealing with clients or anything like that? Anything come out of the woodwork that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think there's always things you do differently. I think overall we've felt like we've had a pretty successful transition so far. I came in day one. We sort of thought that this was probably a 5-year succession plan, but we weren't too sure. Timelines can, of course, evolve as you start going through it. We sort of, this was not a plan where, I joined the business and Duane planned to work for another 15 years because that would demand a very different structure. So because we thought we were dealing with a fairly quick succession, and in our minds 5 years or 4 years was fairly quick, it was important that I got in front of clients early on. And I also thought it was really important that I got in front of clients in a way that added value, because I was really adamant that I didn't want the first impression to be in client meetings that I was this green junior advisor who was sort of learning the ropes, who then was going to be their lead advisor 3 years later. So it was really important that there was things in those very first client meetings that I could own, that I could have, responsibility for. We sort of decided that, given my insurance background, that was a clear thing I could own in client meetings. Financial planning was another easy thing for me to own because, we're dealing with the financial planning software, and I'd done all the financial planning education, so that was an easy thing to own too. And then we sort of co-owned the investment stuff. And I think that worked really well. And I think early on, it solidified in clients' minds that, okay, Ben's at the table, he's bringing some of the table, and, I see him more as a, partner advisor rather than just a junior advisor. I think that was important. There's, of course, things you reflect on, and, certainly after each meeting, you say, okay, how could that have gone differently? How could we have done that better? And that was a constant learning process in terms of how we share communication with clients. We really evolved that because, Duane was used to owning 100% of that communication. All of a sudden, he's got to open up some space for me. So there was times when it wasn't easy to figure out and navigate, but we certainly got through that. And I think as long as you have an open mind, it'll go well.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you've transitioned about 75% of your clientele, where Ben is now the lead advisor. First of all, how did you decide who you were going to start with? And then secondly, maybe walk us through how you work that out with the clients.
Well, Ben was early on, he was just learning about the business, but very early on, we said that all of my clients became our clients. Ben did spend some time with what we call the C clients, but that was really an underuse of his capabilities. And so we had joint meetings with our clients, and I, as much as possible, got out of the way so that he could build rapport with these clients, and he became, in their minds, the primary advisor and was carrying the day. Ben has also attracted significant clients into the business on his own with no help from me. That's just been a natural evolution. Should say that managing change and managing these business, the change is hard work. You have to be open-minded. You got to be committed to respecting each other's views, and letting go for me wasn't easy. And even if you're ready, it's not easy to hand off the responsibility, but giving Ben the room to build rapport and trust with clients was necessary, but not always easy. And of course, you can see maybe that you have to have a successor who's keenly interested in the business, and the interest has to be built. It can't be forced.
Yeah. Have you had, how have the clients reacted? Of course, that's the most important element of this whole transition. So maybe, have you had many clients that have pushed back, or how have they felt about the transition?
It's mostly been positive. We have not had any client attrition.
Great.
New ideas and new approaches have been welcome, and also clients appreciate that we have a succession plan. Like, we've taken the worry away from them to say, okay, where do I go for advice when Duane's retired? Because Ben is picking it up.
Yeah, I would say when I joined, I was concerned that my age was going to be a roadblock, and that, I was thinking, I feel like I can relate, and I can have, build a trusting relationship with, people that are decades older than me. So I thought, I can do that, but are they going to feel the same way? Or are they going to feel like, are they going to assume things based on, my age? And I quickly realized that was not something to worry about at all. People don't really care about age. They care about competence. They care about, good service and an ability to build a trusting relationship with you. And I think if you can do all those things, age completely goes away. The way we measured success early on was client retention and, feedback from clients. And client retention, as Duane said, has been essentially perfect. We haven't lost any clients to the transition. I think the feedback has all been positive. The one question we pretty much always get is, well, Duane, when are you retiring? And that's not a negative thing. That's just mostly a curiosity thing.
Yep.
And, that of course leads to more conversation. And, we don't even know that timeline yet. We're just trying to move things forward so that it becomes an option for Duane rather than a necessity. And I think you have to go through all of these motions, the relationship transfer, the account transfer, and you have to get all that stuff done before it really becomes an option.
Yeah. So Duane, what do you see your role in the firm on a go-forward basis?
Well, what's happened so far is essentially there's been a role reversal here. Ben joined as a junior, and I now serve as his assistant. It's kind of interesting. Ben essentially owns all the key decision making of the business, and as well with clients, as well as how to run the business. He's examined all aspects. I'm here to facilitate the transfer of trust and rapport to Ben, help give him some context about the relationships, these long-term relationships I've had with clients. And we've let the relationships lead here, and there's a lot of paperwork to transitioning a business, but we let the relationship building lead and doing the paperwork second. And so part of my role now is, when the time arrives to actually transition into Ben's name, that the paperwork gets executed efficiently.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say one of the biggest value adds that Duane continues to bring to the table is of course the relationship history. So the deep knowledge of the existing client relationships, the family structures, and just the trust that he's built with all of them over the last decades is huge. And I think that will be the most valuable aspect of Duane's role up until the day he retires, is in client meetings, because of that relationship history. It's something that I continue to benefit from every day. And, that's hugely valuable.
Yeah. Ben, you made an interesting point earlier on around bringing value to these meetings. How have you got yourself up to speed? What have you done educationally wise, both in a formal basis or an informal basis, to get to bring in this extra value?
So I would say the grad school stuff didn't really help directly, at least. So starting my second year of undergrad, I started chipping away at the industry-related designations. So by third year, I had my CFP done fairly quickly. After that, did the CLU, the CHS designation. Following the MBA, while I was working as an advisor, I did the CPA CMA accounting designation, which maybe isn't direct in terms of investment insurance, but it's been very, very useful on the tax side. And I think just brings credibility when I'm talking to, client accounts and things like that. So I think because of some of that industry education, that helped in sort of proving myself to clients that, I'm not somebody who's just thinking about this business within the last year. Clearly, this is something I've been thinking about for a while and been preparing for a while. Other things that I've done is I've tried to get involved in, again, back when I was in school, I was trying to think, how can I get exposed to other financial advisors so I can get a sense of what they're doing, what's working, what's not. So I joined Advocates back when I wasn't even an advisor. They didn't seem to care. I thought they would, but they didn't seem to care. So I joined Advocates, started going to their meetings, ended up joining the board for a number of years of the local chapter. I got involved more recently with the Conestoga College Financial Planning Program, so I sit on the advisory committee for that. So just trying to get some experience with, organizations outside of this immediate business, outside of Manulife Securities, I think is useful too. So that's sort of been the path educationally, and I think, again, if I can give advice to anybody, if you think this is where you want to be, or this is the industry you want to be in some form, try to get some of that stuff out of the way before you actually join the business, if at all possible. I know it's not for a lot of people, but.
Yeah, good. And how about like in an informal basis? And I guess where I'm going with this is, researching new products and offerings that are coming out. Do you spend much time on that issue?
Yeah, so I would say, first off, I'm a data junkie. So I love, first off, I love looking at quant stuff. So I'll look at all the Morningstar information in Morningstar. I'll do all sorts of screens to say, okay, who are the best active managers in this space? So in terms of product and manager selection, my mind is always there, whether I'm at work or not. My mind is sort of always living that, even when I'm at home. I like to think I have some balance, but I feel like I think about it all the time. Things like portfolio construction, again, thinking about all the time. It evolves. Where I am today, it was very different than where I was even 4 years ago when I joined. That's certainly evolved as I've gotten more experience and more exposure to just different people in the industry and different ways of thinking. In terms of the business stuff, I also think about that all the time. So even thinking about, what do we need to do to either increase operational efficiency, or what do we need to do to add more value to clients? And ideally, you're doing things that add to both all the time. And the value add piece is very important, because I think that's what's going to differentiate you in this business. But I think it's also really important to figure out how to scale and how to be operationally efficient, because I think that what is a sustainable size of business today won't be in 5 years. And I think that the industry is going to consolidate, and I want to be one of those that it consolidates too. So constantly thinking about new technologies. How can we better streamline our business? How can we add more value to clients and be able to serve more clients more effectively than we are today, and do so at a lower margin than we are today? So I'm always thinking about that sort of stuff. And where do I bounce ideas off? I'm in 2 study groups, so that's really important. So getting other advisor perspectives, meet a few times a year, just talking to other advisors at all the other industry related stuff that we go to. Just try to pick up things here and there.
All right, very good, very good.
Say, Art, that 85% of our assets now are on the fee-based platform.
Okay.
We and even though we've been working together, Ben's here full time for 4 years, and there was really a lot of preparation that was going on before Ben arrived here. I said way back, I moved to IROC in 2011, and was thinking about where does this business need to go as far as a fee-based model is concerned. So I was already prepping years before Ben was here, because I knew where he would likely want to take the business, and wanted to make sure that it was in good shape when he started working with me.
And that was huge. I, of course, hugely appreciated that. The fact that I could step in and I didn't have some of the administrative hurdles that I would have otherwise had. I could design portfolios how I wanted to. I could move assets if I wanted to. They weren't locked up because of DSCs and things like that. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, good. Okay, final question, then we'll let you go. You've talked about operational efficiency. How have the staff reacted to this transition?
I would like to think well. I think well. So again, they knew that I was coming in and had already, they knew who I was. So one of my co-ops that I did in my undergrad was filling in on mat leave in this business. So they, and they're the two main, the 2 full-time staff have been long-term employees. So they knew who I was. I don't think they were worried about, me coming in and out, or not really having a sense of, what I was doing. But there's definitely, relationship transfer there too. And, it's important for me to, that they see me as both, an advisor, but also just, another member of the team. And I wanted to have a really good relationship with them, which was important. I think they were patient with me. So when I came in, I had lots of ideas. I would look at a process and say, why are we doing it like that? That doesn't make any sense. Let's do it differently. And then, I had a few of those where I realized that there was good reason that things were being done a certain way. And yes, there was lots of things that could be improved, but there was also lots of stuff that was in place that was there for good reason. And, one example I had is, I wanted to track all this information on all of our clients. And I thought, if only we had better data on our clients, we could serve them better. So I created this awful, massive spreadsheet where we started tracking this data, which, you know, turned out wasn't tenable at all. So, you know, things like that, you know, they said, okay, good idea, Ben, good idea. We'll see how this goes. And they were patient, and they sort of let me figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
So I think the staff has transitioned well. We are working in an industry that has a lot of change coming at us all the time. And also the way in which we are transitioning the business means that the work that lands on the desks of our staff is changing as well. But for the most part, they're embracing the change, and it's working well.
Great. Any final comments before we wrap up here today?
One other thing we didn't really touch on was trying to actually put a structure in place. So we started engaging accounting and legal professionals early on. Again, we felt like if we were going to have a 5-year succession, we need to figure out what that path looked like, sort of within the first year, so we could start working towards it. So we put a structure in place. I think it's important that structure has the flexibility to adapt to timelines, because when you're a year in, you might say, okay, 4 years is sort of the plan, but that might turn into 5 or 6, or it might turn into 3. And I think whatever structure you put in place, it's important that it has some flexibility, because I think a lot of people are going to need at least a bit of flexibility. And I would say do it early. So, you know, it's never too early to start talking about some of that stuff if succession is the goal, and trying to figure out how that structure works, because there's significant lead time on some of this stuff. I think by the time we started discussions with the accountant and lawyer, it was probably 2 years before we sort of had the final structure in place. So it takes time. And I would say get good advice early is really important.
I think you have to be purposeful and clear about your timelines, and the successor, don't lie to yourself or your successor. And the successor's got to be willing to put into the time and effort and provide the leadership, which I feel Ben is doing now. And the successor really has to have a vision for the business and where it needs to go beyond the person that's established the business. And I think Ben is carrying that, and he's carrying it well. He's got ideas about where this business needs to go and how we meet the challenges of tomorrow.
Yeah, that's one of the big differences between Duane and myself, is he's not thinking necessarily about, the only reason he's thinking about this business 10 years from now is because he wants me to be successful, but he's not thinking about it for himself necessarily. Yeah. And I think that's a very different mentality. And I think sometimes those things can sort of butt heads, because the things I might want to do is for the business 10 years from now, which doesn't necessarily impact the business today. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing I would say is, you know, I'm always more than happy to have a conversation with people who are in a similar situation, who are thinking about a succession of any sort, certainly family succession, because we're sort of well into it at this point. I had some conversations with people who were well into it when we were starting out, and I know that was really useful. So, you know, more than happy to talk to anybody if they ever have any questions or want to chat.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time. You know, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this meeting is, from my perspective, I think you've done a masterful job of building your transition program. So thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it, Art.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.